All right, pre-AP biology. It is time for the final section of Unit 4, which will take us up to the end of the semester, really. So this is going to kind of get into the final round of topics of material that we have to cover before we take our final exams. Now, I will warn you, there's a lot of stuff that we have to cover in this unit, so it'll take us a couple of weeks. I don't even know if we'll finish it up before Christmas break, but we'll see. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Okay, so I want to, again, just kind of remind you that this entire unit is over cells. So we've talked a lot about the parts of cells, like what cells do, right? They make proteins. We've talked about all the organelles. We've talked about how cells transport things back and forth in and out of the cell. So we kind of understand, at least I hope, up to this point, like the operations of the cell. Like, what is the cell doing? How does it do some of the things that it does? So that's kind of an important concept. Now, in this particular section of the unit, we're going to talk a lot about cell division. Cells divide. For example, one cell can split and form two cells, two become four, four become eight, etc. But that process is actually really important. So before we talk about the details of cell division, let's first talk about why cells need to divide in the first place. And really, it kind of depends on the organism. For example, if we're talking about like little bacteria, like little unicellular organisms, they divide basically as a form of reproduction. That's how they reproduce. Bacteria split in half to make more bacteria, right? Now, multicellular organisms, like us, we don't use cell division to reproduce. We're not like dividing our cells to make more babies. Okay, that's not really how it works. But there are two things that we kind of depend on cell division for. One is to grow, so we can gain more cells. And another one is to repair damaged cells or lost cells. Okay, so let's kind of revisit this real quick. Again, unicellular, if we're talking about a little one-celled organism, they use cell division to reproduce. Again, this is a form of reproduction called asexual reproduction, and it's fairly simple, the concept, right? You've got one cell, this is the parent cell, it undergoes a cell division. Now, there's a lot that goes into that stage, but the cell basically splits, and then we get two what we call daughter cells. And these daughter cells are basically genetically identical to each other. So, just understand sort of the big picture here. What happens when, for example, a bacteria or some kind of a unicellular organism reproduces. It's simply just a cell division. That's basically all it is. Now, again, in multicellular organisms like us, we depend on cell division to grow. We all started right here. This is how we all started. I don't care who you are. All right. I mean, everybody started off as a fertilized egg, otherwise known as a zygote, Z-Y-G-O-T-E. I'll talk about zygotes a lot this year, but a zygote is basically the result of a sperm cell and an egg cell coming together and forming that little fertilized egg. So that one cell is how we all started, right? And then that one cell divided and formed two, and then two divided to form four, and then eight. And then 9 months later, you've got a baby. That baby is the result of 9 months worth of cell divisions, basically. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes on as those cells are dividing to form that baby. But, just kind of, again, kind of the big picture, we, kind of depend on cell division to grow. And this baby's not done growing, right? I mean, it'll continue to grow, for years, after the baby's born. So cell division doesn't stop, necessarily when the baby is born. Now, again, the other big thing that we, again, kind of depend on cell division for is to repair damaged cells. So, I mean, I'm sure this has probably happened to all of us at one time or another. You fall off your bike or you fall down, you skin your knee, you skin your elbow, whatever, and there's a big chunk of cells that have been removed. They've been lost. Well, probably in a couple of days, maybe a week or two, those cells are going to grow back, right? I mean, that's cell division. Those cells are going to grow back again and replace those cells that were lost. Now, they may not regrow exactly the way that they were before. So you might have a nice little scab there, or maybe a little scar, to kind of remind you that, hey, you lost a lot of cells there, at one point. But again, multicellular organisms, we kind of rely on this process to, again, kind of replace any damaged cells that were lost. All right, now before we move on, there's one thing that I think is really important that we sort of understand about cell division. Okay, before cells can divide, and we're ultimately going to talk about cell division, like as far as like the process of it. We won't get to that for a couple more days, but before cells can divide, all of the DNA that's in cells has to get copied. Now, we're going to talk about this process called DNA replication after Christmas break. We'll get more into the details of it, but ultimately, what you need to understand is that all of our DNA is found on structures called chromosomes. Here's a picture of a chromosome here, right? Chromosomes are made of DNA. We've got a whole bunch of chromosomes, right, in our body cells. But those chromosomes have to copy themselves before a cell can split. That's probably really important, because if that DNA, if those chromosomes doesn't get copied, then the new cell isn't going to have any chromosomes, isn't going to have any DNA. So that process must occur. Now, there's a little bit of vocabulary here that I want you to know. Again, here's our chromosome. That's an individual unit. Once that chromosome gets copied, then we have two of them. All right, now we don't call them chromosomes anymore. We call them chromatids. We sometimes call them sister chromatids because they're basically the same chromosome, that was just copied, okay? And they're connected together by this little unit called a centromere. All right, we'll talk more about that unit in a couple of days as well, but it's kind of what, how typically, like when we think of chromosomes, like they have that like X shape to them, that kind of crisscross shape. And that's kind of what you're seeing here, okay? But a chromosome is actually an individual unit. When it copies itself, then we kind of get that sort of X shape to it, and we call those things sister chromatids. So just kind of remember that. That's sort of an important thing that we'll talk a little bit more about down the road. All right. Now, when it comes to chromosomes, I want to talk specifically about humans today, even though, we can talk about different organisms if we want to. But here's a vocab term that's a pretty important one. It's called a karyotype. A karyotype is basically just a set of chromosomes. For example, if we were to take one of your, I don't know, blood cells or something, and crack it open and spill out all the chromosomes onto a slide or a piece of paper or something, if we could do that, but whatever. If we could examine them all, this is what we would probably see. This is kind of kind of an animated or kind of a cartoonish picture of our chromosomes, but what you're going to see is a whole entire set. And we actually give different numbers to certain chromosomes. For example, you have what we call chromosome number 1. There's a chromosome number 2, a chromosome number 3, 4, on and on and on. And you'll notice that there's 22 pairs. And then there's kind of a non-numbered pair. This is actually pair number 23, but they didn't number it here. But you've essentially got 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now, most of these pairs look identical, okay, except for that last pair. We'll get into that more later on. But these pairs that look the same are what we call homologous pairs. For example, pair number 1 is a homologous pair. Pair number 17 is a homologous pair. They're basically two chromosomes that are identical. So these homologous pairs are chromosomes that carry the same genes. Now, we haven't talked about genes yet in this class. You're probably familiar with the term. We'll talk a lot about it in the next unit. But again, this picture here, is kind of showing us two chromosome number 2s. Okay, everybody has two chromosome number 2s. I've got two chromosome number 2s. You've got two chromosome number 2s. Your brother or sister has two chromosome number 2s, etc., etc. These two chromosomes are homologous because they have the same genes. And these little colored bars here, we're going to use those to represent genes. Now, one thing to understand is, for example, chromosome number 2, in reality, it has a lot more than 3 genes. There's like hundreds of genes, okay? This is just showing us a couple, but keep in mind that there's a lot more than just 3. But, for example, okay, this gene right here, let's say this little kind of purplish band here, okay? And you'll notice that it's found on both chromosomes. That particular gene controls a trait, a genetic trait, that's known as brachydactyly. Now, for real, there's actually a gene on chromosome number 2. It's not really a purple band, but there's a gene on chromosome 2 that actually controls this trait. Now, brachydactyly is also known as something called hammer thumb. You kind of look at this dude's thumb and it's kind of flattened. This is actually a more common trait than what you actually think it is. There's a lot of people that are born with thumbs that kind of look like this, but whatever, it's a genetic condition, it's a genetic trait. Everybody has these genes, but not everybody has hammer thumb, not everybody has brachydactyly. And the reason why that is because there's different forms of the gene. All right, so we'll talk about that a little bit more down the road, but just for right now, just kind of understand that. So again, everybody has two chromosome number 2s. So again, if you don't have hammer thumb, it's not like you don't have chromosome 2. You do have chromosome 2. In fact, you do have two genes for brachydactyly. Again, it just kind of depends on what form of the gene you have. Now, I think this is sort of a really important point in the notes today. I want us to understand where these two chromosomes come from. Okay, the origin of a homologous pair. Where do they come from? Well, one of them comes from your mom and one of them comes from your dad. And you can say that about every single one of these pairs. Chromosome 17, one came from mom, one came from dad. Chromosome number 9, you've got two of them. One came from mom, one came from dad. This last pair is called the sex chromosomes. Again, one comes from mom, one comes from dad. Now, you'll notice here that there's two different sex chromosomes. All right. If you have what we call an X and a Y, you're a male. So like I have an X and a Y. They're not homologous. It's kind of a non-homologous pair. But if you're a female, you actually have two X's. So they are actually homologous chromosomes. So it kind of depends if you're males or females. So just kind of understand that about that very last pair. All right, little vocabulary here. Your body, my body, your sister's body, your brother's body, your mom's body, whoever. They all consist of two types of cells. We have what we call somatic cells and what we call gametes or germ cells. Now, somatic cells are basically non-sex cells. So basically anything except for a sperm or an egg cell. Okay, so skin, muscle, blood, whatever. Okay. Every one of your body cells, your somatic cells, contains what we call the diploid number of chromosomes. Now, diploid is basically the entire set of chromosomes. So we just said that the entire set of chromosomes is 46. That picture I showed you, that karyotype, 46 chromosomes, you have 23 pairs. So in humans, your diploid number, it's also known as what we call 2N, I'll come back to that in a second, is 46. So your blood cells have 46 chromosomes. Your brain cells have 46. Your skin cells, your liver cells, your stomach cells, they all have 46. They all have the diploid number. Now, gametes, also known as germ cells, these are your sex cells. These are your sperm and egg cells. Now, your sperm and egg cells contain what we call the haploid number of gametes. One way that I kind of remember haploid, I just remember haploid, half, HH, whatever, alliteration kind of helps me out a little bit. Anyway, the haploid number for humans is 23. And that number is represented by the variable n. So if your haploid number is 23, your diploid number has to be 46. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense to you. All right, but make sure we understand diploid, haploid, somatic cells, gametes. There are differences between those types of cells. Here's a picture of a karyotype of a diploid cell versus a haploid cell. If we took one of your blood cells and spilled out all the chromosomes, this is probably what we'd see if you're a male, because this is a male, right? If we took one of your gametes, one of your sperm or egg cells, and spilled out all the chromosomes, this is what we would see, right? You would see one of each, okay? Now, I mean, I hope we're kind of seeing the big picture here. I mean, think about reproduction, right? A sperm has 23, an egg has 23. When they come together, you get 46. Okay, so that's kind of the point there. Other organisms have different numbers. Fruit flies, for example. Fruit flies have a haploid number of 4 and a diploid number of 8. An apple tree, believe it or not, an apple tree is a living thing. It has a haploid number of 17 and a diploid number of 34. A king crab. King crabs have a haploid number of 104 and a diploid number of 208. Now, what I want us to kind of understand from that is it's not about the number of chromosomes. I wouldn't say a king crab, which has 208 chromosomes in all of its body cells, is any more of a complex organism than what we are. We have 46 chromosomes. It's what's on those chromosomes that matters, right? What are chromosomes made of? They're made of DNA. What's the function of DNA? DNA is what controls your traits. right? It contains instructions to build proteins, which we already know cells build proteins. We may not know how they do it. We'll learn that, but that's sort of an important thing. All right, guys, I'm going to stop here for today, and we'll pick this up on the next lecture. So have a good day, folks. Take care of yourselves, and hopefully I'll see you soon.